Ghosts, angels, demons, fairies, vampires, werewolves. All those stories you heard as a kid. All those stories Mom and Dad said weren't true. For most people, that's all they are. Myth, legend. Occasionally people find there is something out there in the dark. Many years ago, I trained with the late Lou Gentili, one of the best-known demonologists in the United States. When he died, he asked I continue his legacy. I've been continuing investigations since his death, but I also wanted to bring back his efforts to educate the public about what's really out there. Join us for a brand new YouTube series, The Paranormal Encyclopedia, with me, your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist and paranormal investigator, while we investigate what really goes bump in the night.
So, before you think this is all about doom and gloom, well, first of all, it is. Second of all, that is not entirely our purpose. We're here to entertain, we're here to tell you, and you're probably wondering who the hell I am. I'm not the demonologist. It's my job to ask questions, it's my job to be the skeptic. I've got some background in history, particularly about witches, but I'm here to hypothetically be your voice. I'm Drew. Welcome to Paranormal Encyclopedia.
Okay, good evening everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Paranormal Encyclopedia. We're your hosts, Kevin Mears, the demonologist, and
Drew, the not demonologist.
in training, mate, perhaps.
So, today we're going to talk to you about Satan. More specifically, Satanism.
Yes, and, well, of course, the first question that everyone I'm sure is wondering is how many Satanists does it take to screw in a light bulb? Do you know the answer?
I think that would depend. You'd have to have an odd number, because they'd be fighting with each other.
Don't be silly. It's 0 because Satanists prefer the dark.
So, where shall we begin?
Okay, well, why don't we start with the devil in the room and talk about the Church of Satan.
Okay.
So it's fair to say that the way demonologists like myself classify Satanism, there's 3 broad categories. There's almost 4, but one so tightly related to one of the other 2, they might as well be thrown together. Type 1 Satanists, which are the public ones, would be the Worldwide Church of Satan, started by the late Anton Lavey.
And that's, let's be honest, glorified atheism.
It's glorified. It's also Epicureanism, but yes, it is. It's glorified atheism with a healthy dose of up yours Christianity.
Yeah,
because really,
the idea behind that one is that they're viewing religion and the evils that religion has done as your primary evil, and restrictions are placed upon you to inhibit you from becoming all you can be. So, morality is optional. Get that one pretty good?
Yeah. What's amusing, I did a little bit of reading. Lavey was full of himself. If you go to the Church of Satan's website, they have a whole list of various claims he made. His own church has a list of claims the man made and how they're not true and the evidence to support the fact they're not true. Apparently the reason he started the church is essentially a way to make money and get himself publicity. I've also heard it said a few times that he admitted that he basically started it to get laid. Which is a very honest way to start your own religion, I suppose. Like, no, we're just gonna do it for the money and the sex.
I am not going to chime in about any other religions that might have been started for the same reason.
There are a few. The The thing to realize here, because I don't want to dwell on this particular branch of Satanism very much, because they're not Satanism, they're atheism that likes to rub Christianity's nose in it, essentially, which is why they call themselves Satanists.
Mm-hmm.
But they are actually largely law-abiding citizens. There's a fairly well-reported case in 2007 where a teenager wrote an email, to the current head of the church saying he wanted to commit murder in the name of their glorious infernal lord, and the head of the church promptly reported him to the police.
Also connected to them, but not directly, is the Satanic Temple.
I was about to touch on them.
So I guess it's time to move
Although
on.
they're also atheists.
Even more so. Like, very, very much so atheists. But
Yes, whereas Lavey's group actually did perform occult rituals, even if they didn't actually claim to believe they weren't.
they believe
which
in
is-
magic. They don't believe in deities. That's a
Depends on the Satanist.
true.
Realistic.
But the official church, the
Yeah.
official Lavey Satanism believes in magic, but not in deities.
But yes, the Temple of Satan. What's the self-important name for the other one?
The Satanic
Temple of
Temple.
Satanic Temple. Thank you.
The,
The
They're
ones
more
that
of a
put up the
politi-
statue.
yeah, they're a political activist group. They're not. Their religious aspects are nowhere near as important as their public outreach. They're known for putting up the statue, distributing satanic coloring books in a Florida school after an evangelical group blocked some atheist pamphlets that were try to be circulated after an evangelical Christian group was passing out Bibles and was allowed to pass out Bibles in a public school. Other things that they are responsible for are their...
They did a ritual on the grave of Fred Phelps' mother to turn her gay. That's one of my favorites.
Although, more importantly, though, is definitely their right to medical information activism that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
In some states, in order to get an abortion, you have to get a church pamphlet telling you how abortion is wrong, and it has a lot of misinformation in it. So, the temple has stepped up as another religious institution to provide their pamphlets, which is nothing but medical advice.
Actual sound, scientifically
Mhm.
based medical advice.
Um,
But they're religious, so there you go.
Yep, they also back same-sex marriage and a bunch of other things that are generally good. They've also got a Protect Children project, because sometime in some schools, I'm not sure exactly where, they don't specify on their website, there are schools that will use the First Amendment to justify beating children. And so this is providing religious exemption for the children to be beat. To say that it is actually against their religion. You do not actually have to sign up to the actual church for any of these. They'll just send you a letter.
Like you said, it's a political activist group, but it does some good things. I mean,
A lot of good things, mostly good
Yeah.
things. I love these
Uh,
things.
again, they're using the name to thumb their nose at religion, and
Rightly so.
yeah, I mentioned, and I like the Fred Phelps' mother thing, but let's face it, even some of the fringier Christian groups don't like Fred Phelps. The KKK has criticized the man.
When you are thought of as nothing but a hate monger.
By the Klan!
You might just want to stop.
Like,
But hey,
yeah.
It's a scheme for him to make a lot of money.
Yep.
So why is he gonna stop? But anyway, moving on to
Actual Satanists, or to put it another way, demonolators. Or devil worshippers, if you like. People who actually worship the devil. Or something. There's also a public group of them, although they're not as well known anymore. You know which one I'm referring to?
Not quite.
It's called the Church of Set. It was started by a man by the name of Michael
Hey,
Aquino.
pause real quick. Can you shift a little bit to the right? Other way. Mirrored. Keep going. Because you're back to where you were when you started. There you go.
Okay. So Michael Aquino, he started basically an offshoot of the Church of Satan, except one, they actually acknowledge Satan as an actual being, not simply a symbol of man's wickedness, and two, they believe they worship Satan in the form they originally appeared to man, which was Set, the Egyptian god of possibly evil. Depends on which period in Egyptian history you're talking about.
Yeah.
The thing, and this is where I was saying at the beginning that there's kind of four as opposed to three. The two that are interrelated are here. One being teenage Satanism, the other one being actual devil worship. Teenage Satanism is usually the response of teenagers who watch too many Hammer horror movies and listen to too much. And forgive me, Drew, I know you're a metalhead, but let's be honest, they listen to too much metal.
No such thing.
When do you start actually practicing satanic ritual because you think that's what you're supposed to do?
It means you probably don't know much about the band you're listening to, unless you're listening to black metal.
Yeah.
For the most part, even Slayer, with their songs such as God Hates Us All, they're Christian in that band.
And that's one of the most well-known satanic metal groups, is it not?
They're known as satanic.
Yeah, but that's the point. They're actually Christians. They're not devil worshippers.
Yeah, a lot of the bands were just as a shock thing, and it would take maybe 30 seconds on Wikipedia, or just actually listening.
Yeah. Teenagers, on the whole, get into it. It's a rebellion thing. Particularly rebellion against, you have conservative Christian parents. Well, teenagers historically love to rebel. How more rebellious can you get than worshiping the devil?
Not to mention, let's say you get beaten at Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
You might start to not look at Christianity as the good force there.
True. The other thing you're going to run into, and this is true of a lot of how do I put this without becoming insulting, which I don't intend to do?
We can edit it. We have the magic.
I know, I'm just trying to think of the right words. Magically inclined groups and religions, you find that a lot of the times people embrace magic and embrace these religions as a way of gaining power when they don't have it. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Turn to magic for oh crap, I just lost it.
But when you're a teenager who's getting beaten up every day, and all of a sudden, well, hey, you can worship Satan, and you can cast spells and curse these kids who are constantly bullying you. Not to mention the mystique of you're a devil worshiper, you're somebody they're afraid of. It gives them a sense of power that they may not have in their lives.
Which, when you consider other alternatives, are people turning to anorexia, self-harm, not that it's in the same line.
The problem, yeah, and the thing is, there's a lot of ways people go with that. There are people that get involved in neo-paganism and people who get involved in other forms of magic and occultism, and I'm not necessarily bad-mouthing that, but there is a subset of these teenagers who take up a form of devil worship, and this isn't going to necessarily be the fun anti-Christian atheism of Lavey. It's going to be sacrificing black cats,
torturing small animals. It's not particularly common, but there have been cases of murders committed by these types of people. And it's a problem when it happens, though it's not as widespread as particularly 1980s conservative Christian groups try to make it out to be.
But D&D was a portal to Satan.
Yes.
Music makes people worship the devil.
Realistically, as well, there's the other side of it, which is actual devil worshippers that are adults, not just teenagers rebelling against mommy and daddy. There's this idea, particularly you found in the 1980s, of this vast satanic conspiracy that was murdering thousands of people and ritually abusing children. The
Which,
Mcmartin,
ironically, has actually led to child abuse and, in one case, murder.
Yeah.
Which is another branch of the Satanic Temple's outreach programs, is to prevent that shit.
Yeah. And the reality is, in the overwhelming majority of cases in the 80s where there were these accusations of satanic or ritual abuse, it never happened. The Mcmartin Preschool trial, which is one of the most infamous cases, and you guys can go look this up, where basically all these members of preschool were accused of ritually abusing the children there by multiple children. The children later came out and admitted it didn't happen. Which also relates into the issues with recovered memory and hypnotism, and that's all probably an episode in its own right. Because it'd take a while to go through the whole sordid history of the satanic ritual abuse scare. And while I think it's worth doing, we don't really have the time to give it the attention it deserves.
Not so much.
But this is the thing. I think we'll probably wind up revisiting it. The reality is, there are a few cases where where actual devil worshippers, or at least where people who actually abuse children used ritual satanic elements in the crime. Most criminologists and law enforcement officials believe it was an attempt to discredit the child, not an actual act of worship. Particularly post satanic panic scare. You know, if you have a kid who starts talking about, oh, I was ritually abused by this guy wearing a devil mask who said it was in honor of the devil, law enforcement would be less inclined to believe them. Just because they don't want to make fools of themselves again. But again, this is very rare. It's not necessarily something that happens all the time. It's just there's been a few instances of it. A case could be made. We could also debate whether they were actually devil worshippers doing it, or it was just like the FBI and other groups claim that it was just elements used to discredit the kids. It's neither here nor there, and again, it's not common enough. Well, I certainly would advocate that satanic groups do exist, that do commit crimes, and there are other groups that worship dark entities that commit crimes that don't necessarily call them Satan.
Should I get Oh.
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask if I should get into the 1980s, 90s Norwegian blackmail cult.
Yeah, this is actually a good place for it. I was actually going to mention Adolfo Constanta de Jesus, who's definitely an episode in his own right.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk about the Norwegian black metal?
Okay. So, basically, you've got a couple different bands that basically started playing really aggressive metal. They are the most outsider one could possibly be. In Norway, which was generally a bit tighter knit, and very Christian. So they rebelled against that really hard. While you have other bands talking much more about political issues in metal, or just trying to scare people with a little bit of fake Satanism, you have real Satanists in the Norwegian black metal scene, which resulted in church burnings. They went out and burnt down churches, which the actual black metal scene was entirely divided on, and particularly got angry when the most historic church in Norway was burnt to the ground. So they were pretty angry, even within their own scene. But others believe that they deserved it, because they burnt down the original pagan temple before that. Here's the thing, that paganism and Satanism kind of went hand in hand there, as did nihilism, and where the lines were drawn was exceedingly vague. Like it was a person-to-person basis kind of thing, and even so, that one person might jump between. But you then have absolutely crazy things like the band Mayhem happening.